Stars, and welcome to the Rathole. I'm your host, Commissioner Zack. This week, the U.S. general election was held. Results are still being counted and certified, but it's looking like if things were to remain as they are as of recording on Wednesday, it's looking like Joseph R. Biden will be the president of the United States. If you want more on that hard-hitting election analysis, either state level or federal level, shoot me a text. I'm happy to talk about it with anybody. Each one of the team owners of the Pong Stars Fantasy Football League exercised their civic duty, and as a result, everybody received their $5 fab for participating in our democracy. Now, let's get into the matchup recaps of what really matters, fantasy football, in the Pong Stars Fantasy Football League. In game one, we had a close matchup heading into Monday night between the Gluten Freaks and the Randy's Donuts. Now, Josh Allen is officially on fraud watch after his fourth straight sub 17-point performance for the Freaks and his worst of the year with only 12.46. He only went 11 for 18 and 154 passing yards. Well, that's just quite frankly garbage. He got a rushing touchdown. Cool. Pass the ball a little bit more, please, Josh. We'll see how he does over the next couple weeks. Going into the season, looking at bye weeks, the Gluten Freaks organization knew that week 8 would be the toughest for this team. Luckily, Corey Davis decided to show up and score 22.8 points, making it really competitive, as well as the other wide receivers for this squad, Julio Jones scoring 17.2, and Cooper Kupp, the newest freak, scoring 16.5 points. The biggest non-Allen related disappointment was honestly the Titans' just abysmal performance against the Bengals. Scoring 0 points, didn't even get a sack. Quite frankly, outrageous. Whoever picks him up, have at it. Now, Nolan Randy's Donuts, they actually had a tougher week than was expected. This was projected to be a little bit of a blowout. At the beginning of the week, it was looking like Christian McCaffrey, Michael Thomas, and Joe Mixon would all be in the lineup for the squad. And as we all know, that didn't happen. And also, Jesus. And also with the trade, Noel sent Mike Davis away for Travis Fulgham. Luckily for Noel, that trade worked out in week 8 as Fulgham scored double the points that Davis did on the week, as well as a touchdown in his game. Giovanni Bernard scored 21.3 points, backing up Joe Mixon, who was out with injuries. So the backups really came through for this team and scored some major points. One scary part moving forward for this squad is Calvin Ridley getting an ankle injury. Definitely keep an eye on that moving forward. But the biggest piece that decided the match was Monday night, Tampa Bay defense scoring 7 points on 3 sacks and 2 interceptions. Really just devastating news that Daniel Jones is not a good quarterback and made Zack lose this matchup. In game number 2, we had Brennan and the Spring Chickens versus the Dog Sniffers. Brennan's team looked revitalized as they took a hint from the Minnesota Vikings and just relied on Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook scored 4 touchdowns and 47.6 fantasy points for the Chickens, making him the highest scoring running back on the season so far. That is 5.38 points less than Brennan's total score from week 6. That's right. Almost 100% would have been to Dalvin if he had scored that same amount this week. Rodgers had an all right day in his Chickens debut. Really, he actually played fine despite a loss to Minnesota. Jerick McKinnon scored a rushing touchdown on -1 rushing yards, ? But Bobby Woods had a great day despite Jared Goff also being a very bad quarterback. He's very bad at being a good quarterback. That's just all we can really say. Mason Crosby had a tough game in some windy weather conditions. But you know what? It doesn't really matter because it was all good enough to get a win over Thomas and the Dog Sniffers. The Dog Sniffers just couldn't keep up with the production this week. Allen, Boyd, and Kelsey had great days. One bit of disappointing news, Mark Andrews just really continues to be hit and miss, kind of disappointing. Really just infrequently hitting his stride, sometimes scoring, 20 points, sometimes scoring not much. This week, he only scored 4.7. He continues to score either less than 5 or over 14.5 this season. It's just really strange. On Monday night for this squad, Tom Brady and Ronald Jones combined for just over 23 points as well. Definitely not the showing needed to have that miraculous come from behind win. In game 3, we had Sam and the Google team names against Worse Than Trash. This one really came down to the wire somehow, as Sam needed Evan Ingram to play well on Monday night. The names ended up winning this close one, 93.84 to 89.42. Teddy Bridgewater had a tough game against Atlanta this week, posting just over 12 points on Thursday night. Melvin Gordon, tough day. Philip Lindsay came back, got the touchdown carry, and you can't account for that. And for some reason, out of Indianapolis, Jonathan Taylor is just not getting the carries that we were expecting. Only getting 11 in Indianapolis's 14-21 win over Detroit. There are reports that he's dealing with an ankle injury, but it was also reported that the team didn't know the extent of that ankle injury during the game. So there was just a game script option where he just didn't get a lot of carries and they went to other players. Something to keep in mind for the names moving forward. One thing about the names that I really love is this player in the wide receiver position in DK Metcalf. Russell Wilson continues to just choose which wide receiver will have a big day in Seattle. This week, it was the big man himself, DK Metcalf, who scored the highest wide receiver points on the week with 34.1. T. Higgins seems to be a good fit on this team as well. Joe Burrow definitely getting more comfortable in the NFL. He had 11 points on 6 receptions in their win over Tennessee. Last point of concern here is Amari Cooper had a single 5-yard catch on the day against Philadelphia. He's definitely missing Dak Prescott and Andy Dalton, but reports are Andy Dalton might be slated to return in the near future. All right, Worse Than Trash. Let's talk about them. They kind of regressed back to their more normal score, more expected score this week with only 89.42 after coming off their 146-point win. Justin Herbert had another great game. It looks like the Worse Than Trash squad might have found their franchise quarterback. Rest of the team didn't really come to play except for the Philadelphia Eagles scoring 22 points on defense this week. Edwards-Helaire, Swift, DJ Moore, Justin Jefferson all scored 6.5 or fewer points. Hawkinson and Diggs barely cleared 10 as well. Overall, this is the type of score we expect from a team called Worse Than Trash. They definitely made it interesting all the way to the end, though. And I'm excited to see where they go after trading away Terry McLaurin this week. In game number 4, we had Drew and the Gruesome Grinders up against Lucas and Pelicans on a bench. Repeat after me, Pelicans on a bench. The Grinders were able to nab their 3rd win on the year against this now completely and fully depleted Pelicans team. This week for the Pelicans, George Kittle got injured again, looking like he can miss significant time, potentially all the way through the rest of the season. So that leaves Joe Mixon injured and off the squad, Kenny Golladay off the squad and injured, George Kittle off the squad or injured on the squad, Saquon on the squad, and T.Y. Hilton off the squad. Not looking great for those Pelicans on a bench keepers, but more importantly, Lucas is now having that quarterback troubles that seemed to plague Tony at the beginning of the season. This week, Carson Wentz scored only 8.62 points after 2 interceptions and 2 fumbles against Dallas. It was a Dalvin Cook show in Minnesota, so Adam Thielen didn't really have a good fantasy day. Darrell Henderson got injured as well, and he has a week 9 bye, hopefully to heal up, but that could cause some backfield confusion when he comes back with Cam Akers and Malcolm Brown slated to take over the carries. Just a really, really tough week for Lucas. Not the lowest score of the week, but definitely not in a position to really play well. Let's talk about the Grinder side, where they finally had a bit of luck go their way this week, with the Pelicans on a bench club scoring 50 points less than the average points against the squad is used to. Patrick Mahomes had a great day with 36.64 points, and Tyreek Hill scored his first over 20-point game at 23.8 points. These two really actually did cover for the rest of the squad, not hitting projections, including a disappointing week back from Dallas Goedert at only 2 points on 1 reception for the day, and a bust week from notorious boomer buster Tyler Lockett in his Grinders debut. He only scored 5.3 points in this week. Either way, it's a win, despite some concerning pieces there. Great foundation in Mahomes, and the Grinders are really set to expand that 3 wins into many more over the course of the next couple weeks. Now let's talk about the Pong Stars game of the week, where we had the J battle between John and Josh, and it was just not a close matchup. In fact, I'm going to have to put Josh back on the potential fraud list after this week. Not a single player on Not Trading Lamar scored over 15 points, including Lamar himself. He scored only 14.82. Zeke just couldn't get started against Philly. Todd Gurley scored a touchdown, but only had 46 yards on 18 carries. It was a Corey Davis show in Tennessee, leaving A.J. Brown only 10.4 points. Deontay Johnson got hurt again. Overall, just a very disappointing week for Josh and NTL. But let's talk about the other side of this. John and the Rock Plapstas had a great week. Russell Wilson immediately fitting in with this offense, scoring a massive 28.74 points. Backup running back JaMychal Hasty had a touchdown on his 12 carries, but as always, when playing Minnesota, the big player was Devontae Adams, scoring a massive 26.8 points against Minnesota, as it was the Adams show there. Miles Sanders, Nick Chubb, and Aaron Jones were out this week, but keeper Allen Robinson was able to suit up after clearing concussion protocol and scoring a touchdown on 6 receptions and 87 yards. At the time, number 2 defense on the year, Indianapolis also scored a whopping 17 points, though that was after benching the Steelers, who scored 21, so a bit of a bummer there. But this is a very deep and very scary fantasy team for opponents, so definitely watch out, world. We had a bunch of trades this weekend, including 4 on one day on November 2nd, which tied our one-day record that was previously set at 4 on October 14th. I wanted to do trade talks this week. Quite frankly, I got tired and I did not do that. There was something else that I was focusing on this week that took up a lot of attention. That's not a fake yawn. I'm very sleepy. All right, let's head on into the fun fact of the week then. This week, the fun fact of the week is focusing on the rankings that we do each week. So I'm actually going to put the rankings segment in here first so we can get that out of the way so we know where we are. And we'll put them in now. Welcome back. So now we're going to get to the fun fact of the week. Can we get the jingle one more time? Thank you. All right, so let's get into it. This has been a very weird year with the rankings. I know that there's some shenanigans by some of the team owners. So are the rankings really what people think? I don't know. Take them with the greatest salt, like you always do. But yeah, take them with a grain of salt. That's all I'm saying. But going into week 9, we're going to compare last season going into week 9 to this season going into week 9. So 2019 to 2020. So let's put up the graphic now. We have seen 4 teams, their average rank higher than at this same point in 2019, and 6 teams falling in their average rank from 2019 going into this week. So let's focus on the biggest jump. Biggest jump is Sam Olsen going from an 8.89 average rank in 2019 to 3.2 in 2020. That's a jump of 5.69 in the average rankings. definitely massive improvement for Sam and his squad this year. John jumped from 4.86 jumped 4.86 points rather, and Zack jumped 2.67, and Tony jumped 0.33. Now he's going from 9.33 to 9, so I mean it's good for him, but also just keep in mind the contextual spot of where that is. Now, teams lowering their average, Drew falls 0.89 points, Lucas falls 1.22. Again, take that context though. He went from 7th or 8th position last year to just the obvious number 10 this year based on all those injuries. Josh falls 1.47. Noel falls 1.62. Again, context there is some shenanigans with people ranking Noel lower for some reason. Thomas falls 2.77 points, but most astoundingly is Brennan falling 5.88 points. Essentially, Brennan and Sam switched their average ranking gain through week 9 of the 2020 campaign. So all of that gain you see Sam getting, that's taken away from somewhere, and it looks like from this metric, it is being taken away from Brennan. Neat. Now, a few weeks ago, we did have an interview with Brennan Swan, but actually there is one more to do. Facilitated by John Stevens, it is an interview with me, Commissioner Zack Eichten.
All right, welcome Zack Eichten to your very own interview. I'm sure a lot of the people across the league were wondering if we'd ever get to hear from our commissioner, not in his commissioner role, but as the team owner of the Gluten Freaks. Welcome, sir. How you doing today?
I'm feeling it. You can kind of see that I do have my Chipotle shirt on underneath, just repping both sponsors of the Gluten Freaks.
Maybe next season you should be the Chipotle Gluten Freaks.
The Chipotle presents the Gluten Freaks.
Yes, there you go.
Absolutely.
Use code FREAKS with 2 E's and an A.
Yeah. Seriously though, if any of you guys do have sponsorships from Chipotle available for the league, let me know. Hit me up.
Yeah, I'd like one of those burrito cards, those lifetime burrito cards.
Absolutely.
Or whatever. All right, well, let's get right into it. One real quick question about more of your commissioner role first, and then we'll hop into the Gluten Freaks.
Sure.
Obviously, Zack, you're a super committed commissioner. I think myself and everybody are really, really thankful for all the work that you put into this league. As for many of us, it is our either only league or our main league that we participate in. So thank you for that. My question is, do you think that the amount of time that you spend on Commissioner Zack Eichten role helps or hurts your team? Because I could see it helping your team in the sense that you're much more in the loop with league activities and just NFL news, but also it, obviously takes away a lot of your time from, looking at your own roster. So how do you feel that it's affected your team so far this year?
I mean, great question. First of all, thank you for inviting me to do this interview.
Yeah.
Great question. It probably hurts. I mean,
that's fine.
Just realistically, there's a few things that just hurts. Obviously trying to maintain league integrity. I go back to Keepergate. All right. I made a ruling about Sam's team in Cortland Sutton, and we know how that all played out. We don't need to get into it as far as that part goes. But after I made the ruling that Sam was able to sub in someone, I got a trade request on my phone from the Tony Townsend, where he was trying to trade me Drew Brees and a 7th or whatever for an 11th round pick so he could keep Josh Allen.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, that is a good trade for me, right? I don't have to keep Drew and then all this stuff. But do the commissioner role. Obviously, I'm not going to actively try to use that role to, gain an advantage on people. And obviously it ended up going to Lucas, and we voted that down through some rule adjustments, which I was thankful for, due to the blatant cheating attempt. But that's beside the point. Part of it is just Look at the standings for this year. I'm 4-4 right now, second most points against. It's hard to, show like you're upset by that. Like it hits a little different when the commissioner starts complaining about it. But like, losing
Yep.
the Knoll by 2 or like 1.4 points or whatever it was this past week. Having the second most points against behind only Drew. Obviously it's frustrating but it's hard to express that as a commissioner sometimes. So and then just like looking around trying to maintain, a lot of people like ask me about trades and stuff. And a lot of people also tell me what trades they're trying to make, and trying to balance, giving good advice to both sides. There's been a few times where I've had to tell people, no, that's a terrible trade for you. Or yes, you should absolutely try to swindle this person because they're not. But then later that person's asking me, I'm like, no, you're getting swindled.
Yeah,
trying
for sure.
trying to get it all together.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. I was mainly just looking to give you an out for potentially making an excuse for why you're not winning the championship this year, but that's a great answer.
Well, I didn't say I wasn't winning the championship this year, so I don't know
We'll get
why I
into
would have
that
to.
later. We'll get into that later.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well then, shifting the focus then to you more as a team owner. Obviously, last week or a little over a week ago, we had one of the bigger trades in the league to date, with Tyler Lockett moving off of your team. Pretty big name. He's had two of the biggest weeks that any wide receivers had up to this point, but he's also had a couple of really slow weeks, including, some would argue this most recent week. So, obviously we're not going to know the full extent of who won the trade until Eckler and Drake come back. But I'm wondering, now after a week, seeing your players, how they perform, that the ones that you acquired and the ones that you traded away, how are you feeling about the trade? Do you think you'd change anything if you could go back, or are you feeling good about it?
Here's the thing about Tyler. He's a great player on a great team. He and I'm going to get into this in sort of the rest of the Rathole episode this week, but the Seahawks team is real weird. It's a really weird squad. 1 week it'll be Chris Carson's going to go for 30 points. Next week, DK Metcalf this week is going to get 34.1 and be the highest receiver on the week. The week before, obviously, it's Tyler with a 45.5 point score. But then he turns around this week and he gets 5 point whatever. The week before this, last week, DK got like 4 something. And just, it's hard to rely on those guys to be consistent point getters. Yep. And something that's really hurt my team, and hurt a lot of teams this year, but my team especially, has been a lot of guys that are really boom or bust. Cooper Kupp, I'm happy to have him on the team. Obviously, I wish that Jared Goff wasn't a quarterback in the league and he had a better quarterback. But Cooper Kupp is a player that is going to get you between 7 and 17 points every week. Okay,
yes.
That he's going to be a very consistent flex player. And quite frankly, Tyler Lockett was my third receiver. I mean, there's never going to be a week where I would have played Tyler over Julio Jones or Dean. It wouldn't happen. So looking at it right now, got a first round pick out of it, which is what I was hoping to get out of Tyler. I was going to trade him in the offseason, but this opportunity came up now. I'm really big on Austin Eckler. And I was really big on Kenyon Drake coming into this year. He has turned out to be a massive bust. I'm happy to have him off my team. He's a good friend of mine, but he's not a good fantasy.
He's
football.
No David Johnson.
He's no David Johnson. Yeah. And then looking at, like, for instance, Chase Edmonds in Arizona, who is playing spectacular every week, even when Kenyon was there. Who knows if Kenyon Drake will have a starting role when he comes back. But then you look at who is Josh Kelly and Justin Jackson in Los Angeles Chargers organization. Austin Eckler is going to come back and easily take over that backfield based off their production.
Yeah, so, I totally agree with you. I think in terms of the Eckler-Drake side of the trade, I think you definitely, ended up with the better player there and the better situation based on what's happening when those guys are out.
And what it sets me up for is getting into playoffs here. I'll have Eckler and
Mhm.
Jacobs, Julio and Dean, and those are my top four guys. I'm going to play them every
Yep.
time, right? So then it's just a question of who has a better matchup. Does my best friend David Johnson, my up and coming best friend Miles Gaskin, my third best friend's Cooper Cup, who just has the better matchup coming into
Sure.
whatever week? And that's at that point just choosing a flex player, which is what I was
Yep.
really excited about.
Awesome. Yeah, the situation in Seattle reminds me a lot of the situation down in Tampa Bay with Godwin and Evans last year.
Yeah.
It seems to be almost identical. So you definitely picked the right time to sell high on Lockett. It seems like so far, but we'll see how he does the rest of the season. I know Drew's obviously hoping that he'll produce. So
And he'll definitely get he'll probably get a 20-point game. He might even get up to a 30-point game again. I'm hoping it's not this week when I face Drew, but it's more likely that he's going to end up a sub 12 game than he is going to
yeah.
get one of those booms.
Awesome. Well, you kind of already brought up the playoff potential for a playoff run for your team this year. After the draft, you were notably extremely optimistic about your chances this season. I believe you even remarked that you thought you had the best draft and potentially the best roster, maybe with the exception of Null, after the draft.
Yeah.
But you've also throughout this season, called your own team frauds. You're currently 4-4, which is you've definitely put yourself in a good place to at least make the playoffs. But I'm wondering, now that we're through week 8 or week 9, whatever week we're on here in the NFL season, how are you feeling about your title chances this year? Do you still feel as optimistic as you did moments after the draft?
No, I don't. This team is a playoff team, and this team is looking at the roster as a third place team, in my opinion. Maybe fourth, depending on who the matchup is in that last match. I think that you got to bring it up. I mean, it's going to be it's league wide. It doesn't matter if it's real team owners or if it's players. Joshes are frauds in this league. It might seem like you got Josh Allen, you got Josh Jacobs, you got Josh Plingo, but we'll talk about him later, maybe.
Yep.
But Josh Allen and Josh Jacobs, I mean, coming in, both scoring was it like 30 some points in that first week, and then over the last couple weeks, I mean, this past week they both scored 12, right? So,
Yep.
and 12 from a running back is more reasonable, but um, you know, I still think that my team has the best top 3 long-term potential out of this league.
For sure.
I would rank your team a little bit higher after seeing how things have started to shake out across the league this year. And then obviously Noel's team's keepers is a thing on its own. But,
Mm-hmm.
As I'm set up right now, 2 first-round draft picks again. I think that there's players on my team that have potential to be keepers on other squads. So I'm hoping to maybe get a little bit more draft capital. I'm not trying to name names, but obviously Cooper Cup is going to be on the trade block again. Both of my other best friends, Miles Gaskin and David Johnson, might be on the trade block. Josh Allen on the trade block for sure.
Yep.
If people really wanted that, he's on the trade block right now as well.
Hit him in the DMs.
Yeah, hit me in the. I mean, Josh Allen, I think is he's in a slump, but he has the potential. So I know I have my 4 keeper set of Josh, Jacobs. You got Austin
Dean.
Eckler, Dean, and Julio. Those 4 are set. You don't have to ask me about them. They're not going anywhere unless you're trading me Dalvin Brennan. But other than that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, as we all know, playoff football or playoff fantasy football is kind of a weird monster. It really just matters if you get into the playoffs. Once you get in, everybody seems to have a shot. Even in our own league history, I know we've had some lower seeds make title runs. So you should still have a chance. And as of right now, it looks like you have a very, very good chance of making the playoffs. So we'll see. We'll see once we get to playoff time if your team is able to make a deeper run than, right now it sounds like you're thinking you will. Changing pace then a little bit. One of the things that I noticed, and I think a lot of people have kind of pointed out about your team being a weakness, is the tight end position. Obviously, that is almost 100% on the underperformance of Zach Ertz coming in, or he was projected to be like a top 5 tight end going into this season, and as of now he has not contributed hardly anything. And through last week, you have only had about 5% of your total team points coming from the tight end position. I'm curious, with the trade deadline looming, are you looking to potentially make a move for a better tight end, or are you going to rely more on the waiver wire, especially with Ertz going down and Goddard kind of stepping into his spot?
Yeah, so that's the biggest contributing factor to my team not being able to win games. I look at the week 8 matchup with Noel. I think Jimmy Graham had 7 targets or something, and he caught 2 of them. If he catches 2 more of those for 5 yards each, I win the game. Or 3 of them for no yards. Like it's just a complete crapshoot. To that those marginal points really start to add up, and that tight end position really matters. Unfortunately, we're getting to a position where there's just not a lot of depth, and people are really wary giving up their tight ends. I know I was trying to get Johnny Smith for a while, but that's a dead end because Lucas won't give up one of the only players that's not hurt on his team. Obviously, at the beginning of the season, I was really desiring to draft Mark Andrews. Thomas traded up to get him and is like a pit bull and won't let go of him. Although he's been kind of iffy this year too. Zack Ertz, obviously, I should have known not to trust a Zack with an H. That's on me. I didn't want to draft Darren Waller. I didn't want to have too many Vegas guys on my team. You saw what it looked like in Arizona when I had Kenyon and Dean. Kind of not fun. So same thing when I had Chris Carson and Tyler Lockett. Just I don't love having everybody on one team like that. So Zack is still staying in the IR spot. I almost had a trade with Josh a little while ago, but I didn't get a player back, and I decided it wasn't worth it. Jimmy Graham is, he's going to be the starter until Zach Ertz gets back.
Yeah.
There's one player I really want on a different team that I don't think is going to be used, but I don't know if I'm willing to trade with that team owner right now. Because I think the asking price will be a little bit higher than the players.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I think, it's something that, we kind of all laugh about Thomas and his 2 tight end strategy, and Lucas also having 2 tight ends before Kittle went down. But it's something that the tight end is definitely a difference maker for teams. I noticed the 2 weeks that I've lost so far this year, Waller was out, and the other week he had a very low production. So the tight end is definitely a more valuable position than I think a lot of people give it credit for. So hopefully you're able to, figure it out, because it might be an essential piece in your playoff run this year.
Yeah. And quite frankly, so to dive a little bit into Zach Ertz and his lack of production, I mean, when you are the only worthwhile receiver on a team, you're going to get all the coverage, right? So, of course, when, Alshon's out, Jalen Reagor's out, Fulgham hasn't really started in those early weeks before he got injured. Dallas Goedert goes down. Obviously, he's going to get all the coverage, and he's not going to get a lot of targets. He's not going to get a lot of receptions. By the time he comes back, we'll be in a playoff run potentially. With Alshon back, with Jalen Reagor back, with Travis Fulgham doing wonderful, with Dallas Goedert back. And it really disperses that coverage. Hopefully he gets a few more targets. I was really hoping he got traded. Not looking likely.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things you're kind of highlighting here is the difference between having a guy that's, just the guy versus having, one player on a more wide array of weapons, and how that can kind of impact their fantasy production. So kind of in that same vein, there's also a very common debate in fantasy about having a really good player on a bad team versus having, just a decent player on a much better team. So I'm wondering, is that something, are you on one side of that debate? I don't know if personally I really am on, soundly on one side, but I'm just curious, are you, really grounded on one side of that debate?
Um, Coming into this season, I would have said I was strongly on the side of a great player on a bad team.
Mm-hmm.
Not relevant to our league, but in my other league, I have that team.
Mm-hmm.
I have a bunch of really great players on really bad teams, where you can't count on them at all because they just don't have the quarterbacks that can throw to them.
Yep.
That other team, Terry McLaurin, Evan Ingram, Darius Slayton, Allen Robinson, like all these players that are like, wow, these are great players.
Yep.
And just don't produce. So I look at a player like Terry McLaurin, for instance, who recently got traded over to not trading Lamar. And he is one of the best receivers in the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's a target machine, and he's fantastic when he catches the ball. Would I want him on my team? Yes. Would I want a full team of those guys?
Yeah.
No. I want
So there is a little
Julio.
bit
I
of
want
balance there.
Dean. I want one guy like that, one or two
Okay.
guys like that.
I mean, because right now, notably on your team, you have Julio Jones, who would kind of fit that build, but it is a unique situation because like usually bad teams, at least at the wide receiver position, bad teams usually have a bad quarterback. And at least like for Julio, even though the Falcons aren't a great team, that's not because of their offensive production and definitely not because of Matt Ryan. So at least he has a good situation on offense. But yeah, there's guys that are on like the Washington football team or in previous seasons, guys that were like on the Miami Dolphins, I agree. I think having like one or two of those guys is good, but if you have a full squad of those guys, you could potentially be on the fraud list,
Yeah, that so like for instance on my team, I have David Johnson and Myles Gaskin.
Yep.
Both great players.
Well,
I think David Johnson's personal dear friend of mine,
sure.
and Myles Gaskin, I think, has the potential to be like a really good back in the next couple of years.
Yep.
At least a very solid fantasy back,
Mm-hmm.
even if the Dolphins aren't that great. But you know what? If the coach or the isn't handing the ball off, or the game script isn't allowing it, or the line just doesn't hold up, those guys just kind of disappear.
Yep.
Which is why, or like Cooper Kupp, if Jared Goff has a Jared Goff week,
Sure.
then he might not get the production he needs. So those are the I try to keep those guys in flex consideration.
Yeah, sounds good. So far this season, maybe surprisingly, maybe not, Tony Townsend has been a really big storyline. You got Keepergate, you got, several other things regarding his team, but one of the more recent kind of developments in, the worse than trash saga is his move to acquire loads of young players. And I'm curious as to like what your strategy is when it comes to age, because personally I don't put a ton of stock into a player's age, assuming that they're still in their prime or near their prime. I don't really care like if they're 23 versus 27.
Right.
But it is something that admittedly will creep into my mind. So I'm wondering, how much does age with guys like Julio, you already mentioned he's probably going to be a keeper. He's kind of getting up there in age. How much does age really factor into your decision with your five keepers? And how many years are you really looking down the line? Because like for Tony's team, it clearly looks like he's looking multiple years down the line. Whereas like myself with my keepers, I'm mainly just focusing on what they're going to do next season. So I'm wondering like how far down the line you're looking, and how big of a factor age really comes into selecting those keepers.
So preseason, right before or coming up on the draft, Tony was trying to get me to trade Dean and David Johnson over to him for Julio and Todd Gurley.
Okay.
And obviously Julio Jones is a fantastic player. I wanted them on the team, but I was looking at age and going, no, because DeAndre Hopkins is 28 versus 33. and then Todd Gurley's knees are 100 versus David Johnson is 28. So so then in that case, I was looking at age because, the receivers were mostly even. They were mostly even on running back. But then there was something about that just didn't sit right. Once we got in the season and I went 3-0 to start the season, I was going, all right, this could be the year. Who's going to make my team best for this year? DJ Moore's 23, Julio Jones is 33. I'm going to trade DJ Moore for Julio Jones because I think he's going to make my team better this season.
Yeah.
DJ is a great player. It was sad to see him go, obviously. But I was looking at this season. Now, going 4-4, going 1-5 in the last or 1-4 in the last 5 games here, has made me rethink it a little bit. I'm looking to next season for sure, trying to position myself really well. I still think my team could make the run, but if they don't, I want to be in a position that I'm not starting from scratch next year. And I don't think I have that problem. I have 2 first-round picks as of right now. They're on the table for trades for sure. My dog is barking. Sorry. But for sure on the trade block this season. But it would be hard for me to give those up because those two, you might get a Jonathan Taylor or a Clyde or, even Raheem Mostert in that first round. That could be keeper level talent. And we got a lot of teams that are really loaded this year. There's going to be a lot of talent in that first couple rounds. So if Julio does retire after, the 2021 season, then, hopefully I'll have somebody that can backfill that.
For sure.
Historical returns.
Sorry.
Cut. I was kidding. That was a good time. All right. Yeah. Cool. I agree. I think, I don't know. I don't put as much stock into age as, maybe some do, like Tony, but I think we're both kind of somewhere in the middle where it is a factor at times, but definitely not always the most important thing.
Well, looking at Tony's team, he's obviously trading for really young players with a lot of long-term potential for sure. He's got right now 4 first-round picks or whatever. Something to keep in mind with that strategy is that if your top 5 aren't really solid guys, or at least the top 4 aren't like established solid players, then you're setting yourself up that you might end up with, in Tony's case, 9 players that are realistically, none of them are studs.
Right. Yep.
And that's what I'm trying to avoid. That's why Dean is never going to not be on the Gluten Freaks team, most likely.
Right.
Why Josh Jacobs will probably never not be on the Gluten Freaks team. Because they're just so established stud people that it's hard to get rid of those players.
For sure. Nice. You already kind of brought up Josh Allen. He's on the trade block right now. I'll still ask the question. You were notably one of only 3 teams coming into the season to not keep a quarterback. Obviously, you drafted Josh Allen, I believe, in the 3rd round of this 2020 draft, and he started out red hot. Since has cooled down a little bit, but even not necessarily ignoring his performance, but just wondering how you feel about that strategy of not keeping a quarterback. We've kind of had amongst the 3 teams who did it mixed level of success, with myself at 6-2, yourself at 4-4, and then Lucas at 1-7. So I'm just wondering, how do you feel that personally has worked out for you? And do you think, if Josh Allen's still on your roster at the end of the season, will he be a keeper?
So I want to highlight a couple of things here. One, I don't know right now if Josh Allen's going to be a keeper. I really personally liked the strategy of drafting a quarterback, but it was because I knew which quarterback I was targeting, and it was Josh Allen. After seeing Tony keep Drew Brees ? I knew that Josh Allen was going to be available, and I was like, okay, I'm comfortable. Also, I had Jameis Winston, so I'm not going to keep him, obviously.
Yeah.
So then it's tough, right? It depends on what I'm able to get in trade value out of other players. I think if people say someone comes and is like, man, Zach, I have Patrick Mahomes, but I really want Cooper Cup back. We might be able to work something out, and then that takes Cooper Cup out of the question, right?
Right.
Which is what I was going to do with Tyler Lockett. Is I was trying to do that. I think that the difference maker is, well, first of all, I think you're only like 4 points ahead of me in points for.
Yeah, we're all.
But like
a few of us are very close to each other.
And yeah, you're leading at like 985, and I'm at like 981. So mixed success.
980.98. Let's not round up.
All right. Sure. So it's one of those things where it's like we've had mixed level of success. How much of that is due to scheduling? A little bit. So I think you and I have had pretty good success. Lucas, obviously, getting Shrek'd and making some.
Well, in Lucas's case was also a little bit different because of the whole Keepergate thing.
Yeah.
He was planning on keeping Matt Ryan, but ultimately he ended up, not keeping him and only having 4 keepers or 5 keepers. But
and I'm looking at Lucas's, if I can remember right, he's keeping guys like T.Y. Hilton, who just haven't had a good season. Kenny Galladay off his team, Saquon hurt, George Kittle hurt. I can't even remember whose other keeper was. Mixon gone,
traded
off the team. So
and hurt.
So I personally still like the strategy of not drafting a quarterback. Look at Tony's team. Will he have to keep Justin Herbert, or will Herbert be quickly available?
Right.
Or will he be a first-round draft pick for Tony if he has 4 first-round draft picks? Like we don't quite know yet.
Yeah, I personally think we're going to see a few more teams not keeping a quarterback this season. We'll see if that actually happens. But like myself included, I even mentioned in the interview or the trade talks that I did with Brennan, for me, I do like the strategy of not keeping a quarterback. I think the depth that it provides at either your running back or wide receiver position is really helpful. And so even having a guy like Russell Wilson, obviously if he's on my roster, I'm going to keep him. But I think like for teams like you and me who have, an abundance of guys who could be keepers, it could make more sense to try to move that quarterback who other teams might value more, and work from the bottom up again.
Yeah, I think you and I are probably in the position most than Josh and Drew of having an overabundance of keepers. I think Knowles had to trade away a lot of keepers to get the guys he has. I'm in his top 5, obviously, are really solid, but he's not going to be dropping as much talent this year as he did last year. So, Myles Gaskin is a keeper level player. Is he going to be kept on my team? Probably not. There's things like that. But we'll see how it all shakes out. I'm definitely willing to make moves. Everybody knows how much I love picks, so hit me up with those trades.
I think we'll also definitely see a lot more, trade action earlier on in this offseason as well. Obviously, most of the trading last offseason really happened in the last week before the draft. But I think given the way that our league's developed, and especially with trading, and I mentioned in the group message the other day, but just being able to trade picks, for example, just opens up so many more possibilities. So I really think I don't think this level of high trades is going anywhere. I think we're going to continue to see a lot of transactions during the season and even in the off season. So.
Yeah. And a step sort of back into the commissioner role, I love it. I really do. I give you guys a lot of crap for too many trades, but it truly does remind me every time a trade goes through that everybody's always trying to improve their team, and you don't get that in every league. A lot of people just sort of sit back if they go, if they go 0-2 to start the season, they're like, I'll do it next year. And then they just at best up their lineup. And I really love to see the activity.
One of my favorite things about this league is every time we see a trade go through, everybody opens Sleeper and you see all their little bubbles pop up showing that they viewed it already within 5 seconds of the trade happening. And I think, that's obviously all you could ever ask for as a commissioner and as just a league member, is that you just want everybody to be engaged all the way throughout the season. And I think that's something everybody in this league, including guys like, Lucas, who hasn't had the best season, or even teams like Nolan Drew, who've just had really bad luck, they're still staying engaged and trying to make it work out. So definitely love this league.
Same.
All right. Well, I'll hit you with a little bit more of a positive question here. Um, this was a surprise to me, and I'm actually very impressed. You have actually probably been the most consistent team owner in the league when it comes to year performance. Maybe surprisingly to some, but I looked it up, and you actually don't have a single season where you finished with a below 500 regular season record, which is pretty impressive. Obviously, right now you're kind of sitting right on that bubble again here. But I'm wondering, you know, given that level of just repeated success, maybe you could compare yourself to a team like the Packers or the New England Patriots who are repeatedly there. What do you attribute most of that success to year?
That's a great question. So, I mean, you're right. I think that a lot of fantasy football is just putting the time in.
Yep.
Just being like, don't be dumb and draft a kicker in the first round. There's obviously things like that. You just you just learn on the way. One secret. You guys all met Commissioner Andrew Smead of the Rosemont Alumni League last week. Guest spotting for me. Appreciate that. We always have our draft 2 weeks before Labor Day in that league. And I get to see how everybody drafts. And then I get to hear Andrew and all of his analytics that he does. And I get to draft based off of that in our league. So take, for example,
Nice.
Emmanuel Sanders. He was going to be my big sleeper pick this year. Obviously, he's COVID, and Corey Davis did fine. He was supposed to fill in for him last week. He was supposed to be my week 8 guy. But, you learn from Andrew, like, this number 2 receiver for the Saints is always a top 24 receiver.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I was kind of surprised.
That's really neat.
I was rewatching a couple of the older episodes of the Rathole in preparation for this a couple days ago, and I noticed that little nugget that you threw out there, and I was like, that's interesting that Zack just had that ready to go. I wonder where he got that from.
Andrew
I was impressed. Yeah.
So that's obviously helpful. Like, for instance, this year it's a little different now that we have keepers. But for instance, this year, my other league, my team is garbage, and I drafted it. And afterwards I looked at it and went, I don't want any of these people on my other team, and drafted accordingly, because I didn't want to be, reliant on that. Or if I have a really good draft, I'm like, oh, I'm getting these same players. It's helpful to be in multiple leagues.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that you mentioned, just like putting in the work. This is, for me at least, definitely the most work I've ever put into a fantasy football season. And, obviously there's always going to be some level of success that's attributed to luck in fantasy football. But I've been personally surprised in my kind of first attempt to go fully in and like really, put the time in. It really has paid off. So, maybe for some of those lower performing teams, put some more time in and maybe find yourself up at the top with players like myself and Zack. But
maybe
there is a lot of luck involved
game.
too. Yeah, that watching football games definitely helps, and paying for Red Zone.
It's definitely that. I mean, look at where our teams were last year. Both of us battled for that 6th playoff spot last year. You ended up getting the tiebreaker for it. But then over the offseason, I mean, like, put in the time, get the picks ready, do the mock, try to figure out, all right, what's the strategy? I know that, 7 other teams in this league are keeping quarterbacks.
Yep.
I don't need to feel pressured because nobody's going to take a quarterback before the 5th round.
Absolutely.
It's just not going to happen. Just like strategy like that, understanding where other people are at.
Yeah, perfect. Well, we're going to switch it up a little bit here to end the interview. We're actually going to, the penultimate question here is actually going to be the would you rather question, which I know you like to proclaim as everybody's favorite part of the show. But we're going to switch it up. We're going to do it second to last here. I think you'll like the last question as well. So my would you rather question for you, Zack, is would you rather have your best friend, David Johnson, on your team and be an average contributor?
You muted.
Okay, I don't know how that happened.
Restart that
I'll start
question.
over. Sorry about that.
You're good.
So would you rather have David Johnson be on your team and just be kind of like an average contributor, kind of like he's been this year?
Mhm.
Or would you rather get to see your best friend, David Johnson, return to his former 2016 season form and be the number 1 overall fantasy player, but not have him on your team?
Oh,
Trying to see how good of a friend you really are.
honestly, I'd rather have him at full form.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2016 was the first year that I had enough of a good understanding of fantasy football.
Mm-hmm.
I played in 2014 in like a 16 league. Didn't quite click for me. 2015, it took some strategies, obviously, in my other league, and we expanded, and it was an 18 league, so I was still learning the ropes. 2016 is when I really hit my stride. And he was the guy.
Yep.
And it was so fun to have him and have him be enjoyable in the league. And to have that back, to have that energy back would be so fun, even if he wasn't on my team. It's like watching Alvin Kamara. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, this is a fun player to watch. It's or Lamar or Mahomes or any of these other guys where you can look at him and go, man, it is enjoyable and fun that this person is in the league and contributing like this.
Yeah, especially when he's your best friend too.
Especially when he's my best friend. So
yeah, of course.
I'll give him to Lucas, and then he can. Lucas, trade me Saquon, and you can have him in 2016.
I was questioning the level of your friendship, but you answered correctly. You've passed this test.
That's good.
All right. Final question here as we sign off, Zach. I'll mention it again. You've called your own team frauds, and you've called many other teams in this league frauds. But I want to know, as we sign off here, right now, say it to the whole world, say it to the whole league. Who is the team number 1 on the fraud watch list right now?
Right now, this very second, not trading Lamar and Josh Plingo.
Still number 1 on the fraud list.
Still number 1 on the fraud list. Wow. 71 point whatever points. Frauds. Okay. Here's the thing. All right. Here's the thing. Josh has been impacted by injuries just like every other team in this league. But when he's wildly swinging, and he has 100 points less than the other top teams, but he's still number 3 in the league in standings because he has just no points against. And then one player or 2 players go down, and suddenly he can only get 70 points.
Yep.
On the fraud list. Tony's off the fraud list, but that's just because he only had the one big week. So he's not a fraud anymore. We just know he's not good.
All right. Well, you heard it here, folks. Zach Eichten saying that Josh Plingo will not make the playoffs.
Oh, I didn't say that.
I'm pretty sure that's what fraud means.
I think I said that Josh wouldn't lose another game this year.
That is also true. So bold to hear that you're still calling him the number 1 fraud. Must be almost 100% attributed to his just awful loss to my squad last week.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the Gluten Freaks could be on the fraud list for sure up there.
That's not the segment, Zach. One team. You get one team, the ultimate fraud.
Thomas's team, the Dog Sniffers, are a bunch of frauds.
All right. We're ending this. This is just going to turn into everybody being called frauds. Well, thank you, Zach. Commissioner Zach.
Brennan's team is a bunch of frauds.
All right, just end it.
Thanks, John, for a really great interview. I appreciate you guys, sticking it out this year. I've enjoyed being commissioner. I'm glad I got to have a little chat with all of you from a team owner perspective. It's been really enjoyable, and I really love this league and the amount of effort that people put in. I truly do. So let's talk about week 9. Going into week 9, we have a very close set of standings here. So let's take a look. John leads the way with the most points for and a 6-2 record. Lucas and Pelicans on a bench are struggling with the least points for and a 1-7 record. So here's the hoping the AC can get it together and not get the punishment this year. Now, we already had our rankings earlier, so let's talk matchup previews for week 9. In game number 1, we have the gruesome grinders versus the gluten freaks in a G team battle. Traded for players will mostly be sidelined this week between these two teams, as Cooper Kupp is on bye. Austin Eckler and Kenyon Drake are injured. So that really just leaves Tyler Lockett, who did have a bust week as a big man. DK Metcalf ate all the points coming out of that Seattle game. Russ really likes to pick one target and give him points, it seems like. So hopefully this week that is not Tyler Lockett if you are on the gluten freaks side of things. As I mentioned earlier, Josh Allen is on the fraud watch this week as well. As you know, he'll attempt to get his first over 20-point game since week 4 against a interesting Seattle defense. So here's hoping that, Russ throws a ton to DK and Josh has to throw just as many touchdown passes to keep up. DeAndre Hopkins and Julio Jones will be back together as well. Myles Gaskin was slated to get the flex start here as he is potentially a future elite running back, but it's not going to happen. It's looking like it'll be between John Brown or Corey Davis. It's unknown who will get the start at this point. For the Grinders, this will be the week that Antonio Brown could potentially get his first start in the Pong Stars Fantasy Football League since week 2 of 2019 when he was on then named Give Me Dat Juju. So who's to say if he will do well? Prize tight end for this team, Dallas Goedert. Is Dallas not hurt? But he is Dallas on bye this week. So there needs to be a replacement. It looks like Josh Dwelly will, out of San Francisco, will be the replacement for this week. In game number 2, we have Randy's Donuts versus the Google team names. Now look, we all know that Noel is battling Lucas for most injured team. But the good thing for the Donuts is that most of his players are scheduled to come back in the next week or two, including Christian McCaffrey, Michael Thomas, and then not this week because of bye, but Joe Mixon in the following week. Calvin Ridley did get hurt last week, and as of recording is still questionable if they're going to play him against the, sorry, Sam, the relatively weak Denver team. Too many more injuries or delayed returns, however, and Noel may have to drop hurt or on-bye players just to fill roster spots for this week. So he's really hoping that these starters can make the start. For the names, though, it's a question of if their matchups are favorable or not. Melvin Gordon has a great matchup against a bad Atlanta defense, but will Lindsey take the carry, take him away? Jonathan Taylor was out-carried by Wilkins last week, and that was before the coach knew he had an ankle issue. Will he get that lead back role this week? DK Metcalf, obviously relying on Russell Wilson to choose him as the big target. Juju has been hit or miss all season. Will he hit against Dallas? Quite frankly, Sam has all the pieces of a great team. At this point, he just needs to choose right, needs to know how to play them in the next week and get lucky on a couple of those matchups. In game number 3, we have the Spring Chickens versus not trading Lamar. Now, in last week's Pick'em, I made a very bold prediction that Josh would not lose another game after week 8. But that was before Deontay Johnson got hurt again, but also before Terry McLaurin ended up on this roster after a bye week. So I don't know, man. Those are the types of moves, Josh, that I really love. McLaurin is a fantastic player. Love that guy. I wish he wasn't in Washington, but he's still fantastic. Chris Godwin, 50-50 for week 9, it's sounding like, but that's all right due to that roster move for McLaurin. James Robinson will be back after his bye. Hopefully Zeke and Gurley will have some big production as well in week 9. Now, for the Spring Chickens, they're coming off a great win in week 8, really. They're looking to capitalize on that momentum moving into week 9. New addition of Chase Claypool and Damian Harris. They'll both look to make their lineup with great matchups against Dallas and the Jets. Dalvin probably not going to have another 47.6 point game, but I certainly hope he does. That'd be great for the Vikes. And that pair of Bucs players will hopefully do well for this team as well. Most games moving forward for the Spring Chicken squad are must-win games, just given the tight standings. So Brennan will definitely be needing that extra oomph this week to get him over the finish line. In game number 4, we have the Rock Plapstas versus Pelicans on a bench. Now, I'm not trying to be mean here, but this is the likely number 1 seed versus the likely number 10 seed. Pelicans on a bench have been eliminated from this year's playoff contention mathematically at this point. But We have seen them put up real big numbers in the past, and there's no guarantees in fantasy football. The biggest question for Lucas is he going to be able to trust Tua, who is the only quarterback on this team not on a bye in week 9? So it's really just a matter of filling in the lineup as best he can and hoping for the best, potentially playing a spoiler role against the Rock Plopsters. Now, the Rock Plopsters are kind of in a bit of a pickle actually this week, as Aaron Jones might not play. Jamal Williams has been ruled out due to COVID. Miles Sanders is on bye, and Nick Chubb is still out. JaMychal Hasty may be the lead back for this team with Antonio Gibson. This is likely the worst position to be in for the Plopsters as they look to expand their number 1 spot. Luckily, Pittsburgh, the number 1 real defense and right now ranked number 4 fantasy defense, will be in the lineup against Dallas. That's 30 points right there. So definitely a great shot for the Plopsters this week. So now let's head on over to the Pong Stars game of the week. Face off for the first time this season. It's Herbert v. Watson, Clyde v. Ron, Keenan v. Stefan. It's going to be a tough battle between these two teams as they battle out for the supremacy of the team. Will Kelsey and Andrews both boom this week for the first time? Who knows? Will Justin Jefferson explode versus Detroit like we know he is capable of? Will Tony be labeled fraud? Or will he be labeled worse than trash? It's really anyone's guess. At this point, you guys both got to set your lineups the best. I think a pretty good toss-up right now. That's just my opinion, because I still do think that Thomas's squad of the dog sniffers should be on the fraud watch, even if we're not watching them as closely as we are other folks like the Gluten Freaks and Not Trading Lamar. Good luck to these two teams as they face off for that T title. Now let's head on over to the Pong Stars Pick'em. All right, folks, welcome to this week's episode of Pong Stars Pick'em. We only have the 3 of us today, so let's hop into it right away.
The best three, some may say.
Some may say that. As everybody knows, this segment is sponsored by Chipotle and Voting, our 2 biggest sponsors of the show. Chipotle. It's election day, 5:20 p.m. right now, so we don't know.
The trade deadline day as well. We also don't know.
Don't care about that right now.
Big deal.
Bigger things to do.
Dude,
all right, let's hop into it today. Battle number 1, we have a GG between the Gluten Freaks and the Gruesome Grinders. And let's say this is going to be an interesting one. I'll go first. I'm taking the Gruesome Grinders this week. Myles Gaskin's out. He was going to be going off for at least 30 points this week, and now he's not playing. So giving it to Drew off that news alone for sure. John, who do you got?
Yeah, I'm taking Drew. Possibly the only team that I'm bigger on than my own team. Did that make sense? Is Drew Mahold, and I think he's going to win this week.
Noel?
Words.
Yeah, words. Words are tough. Unfortunately, I'm going with Drew as well. I like some of the players on Zack's team, their matchups, like David Johnson against Jacksonville. We all saw how Jacksonville gives up a lot of points to running backs.
Yeah.
But Drew, he doesn't even have a tight end in place right now, but he's got Mahomes, Henry, and Chase Edmonds all going against great matchups as well. And you just can't go against some.
Yeah, while we're recording, no tight end for the GGs, and they're projected 130 points roughly. So that's just it's gonna be a good week for them.
Yeah, he's
and
got some good
make
matchups
it to
as well.
4 and 5 on the season. Let's move into matchup number 2. We have the roommate matchup between Randy's Donuts and the Googled team names. I think this is going to be a tough one. We actually have it looks like a split down the middle on this one, but I'm going to take Randy's Donuts. It's looking like McCaffrey and Michael Thomas will be back, and that's the ball game.
Fingers crossed.
Nolan, yeah.
Yeah, I got myself on the sole basis that McCaffrey and Thomas will be back. I really need my top running back and receiver back just to boost my lineup. So,
All right.
Yeah.
And John.
I am also taking Noel this week, and it's actually my lock of the week. I think a little shake and bake time for Noel.
Absolutely.
Finally.
let's hope so.
All right. Let's move on to matchup number 3 then, where we have
And Sam's home.
of course he is, where we have the Spring Chickens versus not trading Lamar. We'll start with John this time.
I'm going to go with not trading Lamar this week, even though he did not look good at all last week. I don't know, just kind of a gut feeling. I feel like Josh is going to have a better week this time around. So going with him.
I'm actually going with Swan because the opposite of you and Drew, Josh's players have some difficult matchups. Lamar Jackson isn't the same player that he was last year, and he's going against one of the better defenses this week in Indianapolis.
Yep.
And then with the Cowboys, their offense is just terrible since Dak has been injured, and so I don't think Zeke is going to be able to do too much against the Steelers defense. So I got Swan this week.
Yeah, I said last week, you can go back and watch, that Josh would not lose another match this season. Clearly, I don't know what I was on because I'm picking Brennan Swan and the Spring Chickens. I think I was swayed by Brennan's sub 60 week performance on the 2 weeks prior to last week before Dalvin got 47.6 points. Unlikely he'll do that again, but still going to get a lot. And Josh is back on the fraud list after a 71 point. So I'm revising my old hot take to come up with a new hot take. Josh will not win this matchup.
Oh, I thought you were going to go with the rest of the year, but
no. Although Josh is on, I mean, take a look at Josh in the standings. He may be 5-3, but he's 100 points less. Oh, good. So glad Sam made it. Thank you. All right. I don't care, Sam. We're busy. Let's move on to match number 4, where we have the Rock Plopstas versus the Pelicans on a bench. Pelicans on a bench. So let's address it. Lucas changed his team name, trying to capture some of that rebrand success that Randy's Donuts had. But unfortunately, it's not going to work. I know Lucas is playing games right now where he only has Tua in the lineup, but quite frankly, might as well based on the number of injuries to this team. It's going to be Rock Plops' blowout. Noel, who you got? Oh, yeah. They're my lock. Yeah,
as we also too. I'm picking John in this one as my lock as well. Yeah, as we said, Lucas is just torn apart with injuries, so not much you can do about it.
Yeah.
Yep, I will take myself as well. Would have locked myself if I could have, but can't. And yeah, I kind of hope Lucas does actually field a roster because I would like my points against to not be super low and have teams call me fraud. So hopefully Lucas puts up a respectable score this week and doesn't make me look fraudulent.
I mean, you may be fraudulent regardless of this week, so who knows?
Highest points for in the league, not fraudulent, but okay.
Yeah, but 7th lowest in points against.
That has nothing to do with it.
You're also only winning in points for by 4 points, so calm down.
All right.
Without any 3 of my keeper running backs last year.
Tell me about it. The max points for is Drew at 1106. So
calling me fraudulent would be
points again.
I'm not saying you're fraudulent. I'm just saying calm down.
No, Zack did.
Oh. Zack calls everybody frauds.
That's true. Everybody in this league is fraudulent. All right, let's move on.
All I'm saying is I was right. Oh wait, I did not score 200 points last week. Sorry.
No. Let's move on to.
That's okay. Swan and I did score 3.
Oh my god. Let me go. Let me move on. All right. Game of the week. We have the T battle between Tony and Thomas. The dog differs versus worse than trash. Going to be an interesting matchup, but I'm taking the dog sniffers over the not on the fraudulent list anymore because we just know they're not good. That is worse than trash. So dog sniffers all the way. Noel, who do you got?
Yeah, I got the dog sniffers as well. And I'd like to make amends on my last pick when I said John's my lock. I got the Rock Lobsters as my lock.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry about that.
All right.
It's okay.
John, game of the week.
Game of the week, kind of a shitty game of the week in my opinion.
All right.
Dog sniffers.
Name a better game of the week. You can't. There wasn't that many.
Me versus Lucas would be a great game of the week.
That's like saying the Cowboys are the game of the week every week. Come on.
1 versus 10.
John
Everybody
is just
wants to see it.
America's team. John is
I am America's team. Yes. I should be prime time every time.
Oh, God. All right. Well, that's all we got for this week's episode. No bonus question this week. And before we sign off, let me grab the standings. We have a tie for first place between Drew and Sam at 29. Then third place, 28 is Noel. Fourth is Zack at 25. Fifth is John at 24. And sixth is Thomas at 23. So that's the standings. Scoreboard's coming up next. But thanks for playing, boys, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, picking players. Now that's all we have this week on this episode of the Rat Hole. I'm your host, Commissioner Zack Eichton, and thanks for voting. Should we try that one again? All right. Take 2. Jesus. Oh, Vince, what do you think? Talking about Tony seems so boring. It's putting me to sleep.